Hey everyone, Dr. Stillman here, and today we are going to be talking about really what Jim and I view as the fundamentals of well-being. We find over and over again that people who are paying attention to just a few or even 90% of these are frequently not getting the results that they want. They are mired in different diseases that they can't get to go away or that they can't at least get under control. And we want to talk about the things that we see people missing on a regular basis. And it's really important for people to understand that they can really go one of sometimes many different directions with each of these, which is why it's not as simple as just hydrate, exercise, sleep better, just that those buzzwords are why you're here. They haven't done justice to the complexity of the question. So when we talked about what this really consists of, the big things that are fundamental for people, it's sleep, their breathing mechanics, their hydration, their light, their diet, and then training versus overtraining. We're not going to get into the details of all those today because that would take way too long, but we're going to give people a very basic overview with some examples from each of these. And then in subsequent videos, we're going to really drill down and really give you more detail and direction for each one of these so that you actually have the understanding of each of them in the detail that you need in order to get the results that you want. So Jim, let's talk first about sleep. Where do you start talking to people about sleep? And what are the first questions you like to ask people?
Well, that's day one, right? That's the fundamental foundation of everything. When I struggle, my sleep is, goes to heck. And, here's the thing about all this stuff, right? It's so individual, right? So It's basically, we got to figure out for some people, for especially females, if they're on a low carb diet, they're having problems sleeping, they might need to have some carbs in their diet. Some people, they're in front of a screen all day. They're under a lot of stress. It's a mom who's literally running around like a chicken with her head cut off. She's wired, she's exhausted during the day, hammering caffeine, and then she tries to go to bed and she's wired but tired. She just can't, so she's got to do some meditation stuff during the day, slow down a little bit, do some breathing exercises at night. So, but all of it, if you're not getting out in the morning sun, you're not setting your clock. So that's got to do that, period. Like that's a no negotiation. Like stick your head out the window or you're driving in your car, that's essentially what you got to do. Right.
Yeah. I think the disconnect there for a lot of people is they think that sleep is about what they're doing at night. And It is just as much, if not more so, about what you're doing during the day.
Some people are having that coffee at noon and that's what's, having them, when I get in trouble and I start hammering caffeine, like if I have one after 10 o'clock, like it's going to keep me up. Other people, alcohol, they don't realize that alcohol is a depressant, but it'll also wake you up in the middle of the night, right? So, and then not having a settle down routine, the lights are on at night, the TV's on, not having, like little tricks like reading with a red light headlamp, a real book, is a really good way to put you to sleep. But a lot of people are just buzzing around like 150 miles an hour and in hopes that they hit the pillow and they're exhausted and they just fall asleep because they're exhausted. So having a routine that you get into where you start winding down like at 9 o'clock and, getting the lights off in the house. And a lot of people are just so busy and on their phones all the time. They just can't shut off.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I've noticed. And you have to go through it with somebody. And, I was talking to a couple of family with a little boy and two little boys. And I was like, talk to the dad and the mom. And I was like, you guys are going to have to get on the page because the son was having some issues. And you guys are going to have to get on the page and lead. Like, you guys are going to have to set the example on this. Like, if you have a family, we 9 o'clock, we start winding down, we get the TVs off, and people don't want to do that. They don't want to make people upset. But if you don't have sleep, you don't have anything else. And that's really the foundation of everything. And you've got to figure out, some people, I need a cold room. Like I can't sleep without a cold room. I need a dark room, unplugging your Wi-Fi router at night. So if you can check off as many of these simple boxes and then see go in the right direction. And then if you're still having problems, then we have to dive in even deeper. But getting those basics and being consistent, people will do it like every once in a while. But they won't do it consistently. A good friend of mine, Joel Jamieson, he was one of the main guys in the fitness industry that brought HRV. He basically trains MMA athletes. And he found that they were exhausted. That's why they would gas out in fights. And their coaches would be like, we didn't train enough. No, they were training too much, right? And Joel talks about, people talk about, well, you got to be disciplined to go to the gym. You got to be disciplined to do this. It takes discipline to get your ass in bed at night and not go out with your friends. It takes discipline to say, yeah, I'm not going to have that beer at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock. It takes discipline to say, I'm not going to have that cup of coffee at 3 o'clock. That's where the discipline is in your lifestyle. Going to the gym is easy. It's the rest of the time that's the hard part.
Mm-hmm. Right. And people misperceive this because they think that going to sleep is about, it's about taking a pill. It's about taking a powder. It's about stretching or taking a hot shower. It starts when you wake up. And this cuts both ways, because I've had patients come in who were actually sleeping too much, and they were wondering why they were having disrupted sleep. A lot of them don't realize that actually, if you're getting more than or spending more than 9 to 10 hours in bed at night, it's actually pretty normal to wake up in the middle of the night. But this can create some problems, because if they wake up in the middle of the night and they're using their devices, they're turning the TV on because they can't sleep, then they're ruining their sleep, right? So the point today is not to really exhaustively, treat sleep disorders and talk about sleep. It's really just to give people this idea that there is so much more to all of this. But overwhelmingly, what we find, and why we've covered sleep first, is that until that piece of the puzzle is put together, you are wasting your time on all the rest of it. Now, a lot of these other things that we're going to talk about really play a critical role in sleep, which we'll unpack in the next video, where we're going to talk just about sleep and all the different factors that go into it. The first of these is actually breath and breathing mechanics. And to your point where you talked about how people get ramped up during the day and then be wired and tired, not able to sleep at night, if there's one thing that I can teach people to do to relax during the day, it's to change their breathing mechanics. Mm-hmm. And this is where people will think, well, I'm winding down at the end of the day. I'm relaxing. I'm having, an alcoholic beverage that I know helps me go to sleep, or I'm popping the Xanax the doctor gave me, or I'm taking my kava root, or I'm taking my valerian root, or I'm taking my magnesium powder or whatever. And why can't I go to sleep? A lot of people are ramped up during the day because their breathing mechanics are totally dysfunctional because of modern life. Jim, where do you start with breathing mechanics, and what do you think the biggest things are that really derail people with this?
It's such a huge rabbit hole. I mean,
yeah, and we're going to spend a whole episode.
Oh, I know.
Talking about breath.
And it's totally individual too, right? So, getting people. So the number one thing is getting people to breathe less, right? Like right now during these interviews, I get so worked up. I'm fired up. I'm talking. I'm coaching, I'm coaching 20, 30 girls at a time. I'm, over breathing, obviously. And also with my, my powerlifting career, over breathing was a tool to lift heavy things. So you get stuck in this state of inhalation where you can't exhale. So the long exhale. So one, I talk about it all the time. If you're in your car, you're breathing through your nose, your mouth is closed, the tongue's on the roof of your mouth. That helps you go into a parasympathetic state, right? And here's the thing, I see it when I'm working with a guy right now who can't get parasympathetic. His HRV score in the middle of the night is almost 12, which is the bottom end. He's gotten better. He's in the 40s or 50s now. But when we started, he was 12. And even when he was sleeping, he was in a state of alert, right? So, slowing the breathing down. And then I can film some videos of some things, just getting over a stability ball and rounding your back and breathing into your upper back and expanding through the back of your thorax, because we get stuck in this extended position where we're arched, and our diaphragm and our belly button are not lined up. And the diaphragm is not a breathing muscle. It's a postural muscle when it's in that position. So if your rib cage is stuck up here and your pelvic diaphragm and your diaphragm are not lined up, then your neck and your traps and your lats become your breathers, right? So rounding over a ball, sitting in a chair, blowing up a balloon, helping to restore that canister. And there's things we can do, and you can manually have someone blow your ribs down. You'd want to go to somebody who's does postural restoration work to do that. A physical therapist who has a postural restoration background. They're out of Nebraska. And the way you exercise too, you don't want to drive that extended pattern where you're, arching really hard. You want to do things to create some variability in your movement.
Right.
You want to be able to flex your spine, like even hanging from like sitting down and hanging from a post where you're letting your back go and you're letting your pelvis tuck under you to get you some flexion. So you're not stuck like in extension. Right. And a lot of the hardcore exercise programs, they use extension, they drive extension, and that leads to, being stuck in this in a state of inhalation. You can't exhale. When you can't exhale, you can't shut off. So before bed or in the afternoons, I'll breathe in through my nose for 4, I'll hold for 4, and I'll out for 6. And it's a back kind of out.
Yep.
So just keeping it really simple for people. And when I work with people, via the internet or in person, we do things at the end of the workout, things at the beginning of the workout to give them some variability, to improve their rib cage mechanics, to improve their pelvis and rib cage basic relationship. And that helps with everything. It helps with pelvic floor disorders. Like if you're like this, you're going to have, you could have pelvic floor disorders. You could have all sorts of fun stuff. You're in a state of inhalation. You're not going to digest your food as well because you're running from a bear the whole time. Extension, You scare like a toddler, they arch, and like that's how you run away from something, right? And the problem is we get stuck in this because of our modern world, and it's like you're in this state of alert all the time. And I lived like that for a long time, and I still struggle. My body loves extension, right? So managing that, but just starting with like you're in Kroger, you're in Publix, whatever store, Whole Paycheck, Trader Joe's, Costco, whatever your choice is.
Yeah.
Mouth is closed. You're breathing through your nose. You're off your phone. I get stuck on my phone and I'm like, ooh, and you just, woo, and it just keeps going.
Right.
That's where we start, and if that improves, if that helps things improve. And then I look at posture. I look at, do they have variability or are they stuck in, there's no bad posture. The worst posture is the one you're in, right? So we're made to move in different ways. And what happens is we get stuck in one strategy and we can't get out of it. That's when you're in trouble.
Yeah. And on that note, the other thing I see people doing is they get very into breath work. They've heard about Wim Hof, or they've heard about, I've never seen anybody get hurt with Buteyko breathing, but Wim Hof, I've seen it wreck people's
you're basically hyperventilating, and most people need to shut it off. They don't need to
Exactly.
They don't need to ramp up more. Most people are already ramped up, and he's using it for a specific tool to create a immune response or a heat response. It's very powerful. I used it in powerlifting. I used that hyper breathing to create massive amounts of adrenaline and strength. Most people are already stuck there all the time. They need Buteyko. They need restorative yoga is one of my favorite things to do. They prop you up with pillows. They put you in different poses, and you breathe through your nose and out through your mouth. So that's something I recommend people do when they come to me. I'm like, restorative yoga is one of the best things that people can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or Tai Chi or anything that's, we call working in instead of working out.
Yeah. So long as the breath work there is going to be the right type for them. Yeah.
That's excellent.
The next fundamental is hydration. And I see people making big mistakes with their hydration. And the two big mistakes I see people making are overhydration and lack of mineralization, which is kind of the same thing. When I work with people on this, it's very tailored to their mineral panels that I've gotten back on lab work. Some people need more sodium. Some people need more potassium. Some people need more magnesium. Some people can handle calcium. Some people can't. I'm curious what you say to people in the gym, about how much they're drinking, what they're drinking, because I see it making such a big difference in people's lives.
Unless somebody comes with me, I just tell people to drink more spring water. I mean, I leave it at that. And then if they have a specific problem, then we'll dive into it. Yeah. But most people are just drinking too many diet sodas and too many, so if I can just get them to drink reverse osmosis or spring water, that's getting them going in the right direction. And honestly, in the last 25 years, I've maybe had one or two kids that I had to deal with hydration. One of them was a wrestler and he was cutting weight. And so we did a very, very watered down Pedialyte. And that helped him because he was losing so many electrolytes. We took like a quarter Pedialyte and the rest water. And he was not doing any electrolytes after, and he was like literally dying. Like he was.
And
we
people really,
we started doing that Pedialyte mix, and he was a different person, so.
yeah.
But
And
that's an extreme example. But most people, if they just switch from sodas and whatever else juices that they're drinking to like some sort of spring water, they're going to do much better.
I agree. And that the thing that people don't realize, and that really doesn't, I think, get emphasized enough in the health and wellness world, is that the reason for that is that these hard waters that have minerals in them, and a spring water is generally a hard water. It's got about 200 to 300 to 400 parts per million of total dissolved solids. That's going to be a combination mostly of calcium, magnesium, sometimes sulfur, silica, a variety of elements. But the reason that's so important in your performance and your well-being is if you're just drinking RO water or distilled water or anything like that, it can pull those minerals out. The more acid you have coming in from something, say like diet soda or Coca-Cola or whatever, that's also going to pull that out. That's why those things are strongly linked to diseases like osteoporosis. And the more mineral water people are getting in, the more it's going to supply their body with the minerals they need to actually make energy, which is what those things are used for in the cell. And this is one of the things that ends up getting people get really confused about in the health and wellness space, because while there's a place for electrolyte, repletion or sodium solutions and salt and things like that, how you do it, Jim and I are always tailoring this to people. How much salt for this person, for this workout, for this day, and this latitude, at this temperature, it can be very, very, very different.
Well, and the body's very resilient. I mean, it's so good at adjusting like your body temperature, your body pH. The body is an amazing machine, but I mean, I think one of the big problems is the demonization of salt. I think is a big one. I think people are so scared to death of salt that causes a lot of problems, for people. That's something I've seen a lot, especially with people that exercise a lot.
Yeah, and it's been unfair. Absolutely agree. Next thing is light, which we talk about all the time, and I feel like we've already talked about a lot today with regards to sleep. Getting too much light during the day, not getting enough light during the day, or getting the wrong type of light during the day, or getting too much light at night, like blue and green light. We see people going both ways and making mistakes, thinking that they're getting enough light during the day when they're really actually in a very dim office building, or thinking that they're not getting too much artificial light at night when in fact they're not using the right blue blockers. Their screen is putting out way more, lumens than they thought. I see people not improving when they don't fix their light environment at night. What do you see in the gym?
Essentially the same thing. I mean, we just live an indoor lifestyle. I mean, most of the people today, 97% of people don't even go outside. When they do, they're covered up like a sheik, So except we don't live on the equator. And it comes down to basics. Like most people, like that's the thing about this space is like we've got 95% of the population who's just like doesn't do any of this stuff. And so it's hard. And then you've got people that are so extreme that they won't even go in a store without putting blue blockers on, So, it's like getting people to like, at least like I say, like get the 10 to 15 in the morning, walk outside 3 times a day for 10 minutes after you eat. And that gets most people going in the right direction. And then get your lights off at night. When the sun goes down, get the lights off. If you're going to watch TV, get some good blue blockers. But, that's most people, when they do that, it makes a massive, like within even the kids, like the kids I work with, when they, the little 3-button click, you can turn your iPhone red, the screen red, that alone makes like, they're like, man, I've never slept that good before in my life. So, it's just one of those things is like, what do you have going on? Are you like, you have cancer, or have you gained some weight? You don't have any energy. A lot of this is going to depend. Like with me, when my life was on the line, because I was having multiple infections a year, I was a little more motivated to take some extreme measures, somebody that's got, a cancer diagnosis or some really crazy autoimmune diseases are going to be a little more motivated. But for the general public that come to me in the gym, I'm not going to be like, you need to be standing outside naked at sunrise in your bare feet in the grass, like they're going to look at me like, who the hell is this guy? Right. So, it all comes down to what people can actually do consistently. And if you give them too many things and they start out like out of the gate like a bull but then a year from now, they can't maintain it. This stuff just needs to be part of your everyday lifestyle. And then it's so much easier and so much more sustainable because this stuff has, massive effects cumulatively over time.
And it's really remarkable to see how much people respond to just small shifts in their light environment, just like you said. And that's what makes it so fundamental, is that a small mistake can create a very big result.
Yes. Well, and it's starting to hit the mainstream, like science, like Huberman, like he's talking about on his podcast. And he's the thing about him, and a lot of people have kind of bashed him, but he's not, because he's a Stanford guy, he can't make assumptions, right? He's only basically stating as a fact the things that are clear cut, where there's other people in this space that are making assumptions based on this study, based on this.
That's right. They're making a lot of logical jumps.
Educated guesses, which is fine. Where, because a lot of people in this space will be like, Huberman's not extreme enough. He's only giving you part of the story, and it may be true, but he's giving what he feels comfortable that he can say, this is pretty much a fact, right?
Exactly.
He's not speculating, down the road. And there's a lot of people in this space that speculate that get things right. And there's a lot of people in this space that speculate that don't get things right. So, look at all the antioxidant stuff now that, years ago, they're like, take your antioxidants. And now it shows that it actually, antioxidants can have a negative effect on you because it doesn't allow the inflammatory response, So all these people were like, take all these antioxidants, and in actuality, in some cases, it can be harmful to you. So we have to be careful, how far down rabbit holes we go. And especially with normal people, with normies, right? Like somebody that's coming into my gym to lose some weight. It takes me, some of the girls I trained and some of the people I trained for 20 years, it was a slow indoctrination unless they had something radical that they needed to fix, right? But it was, over a period of years, and they bought in. They would do something and say, oh, wow, that made a big difference. I feel so much better. And then they'd try something else, and they would just, and all of a sudden, they're posting on their Facebook page about how they like cold, they like taking cold baths. And I'm like, well, I've been talking about that for 6 years.
That's right.
And they're like, well, yeah, I finally decided to do it. So, a lot of this stuff takes time, and just getting people to go in the direction that they're comfortable and that's sustainable.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually a nice segue into the next piece of this, which is diet. And next fundamental that we've talked about is that, people really they come in with a lot of preconceived notions or a lot of advice they've read about on the internet or heard about on podcasts about what they should eat and what supplements they should take. And I'm just amazed and blown away by how many people are on supplements without any understanding of where their, actual metabolism is, what their genetics are, what their environment is doing to them. And this is one of the places where people really get hamstrung in their search for wellness. They are eating the wrong diet for them because they have listened to people who didn't take into account unique factors that modify or change their circumstances. You mentioned one of these things that we frequently see earlier, which is women not eating enough carbohydrates or complex carbohydrates, to be very specific, at night, leading to them waking up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with this very slight hypoglycemia that's not enough to put them in the hospital, but is enough to wake them up from, sleep. What are your thoughts on how people go to these extremes of diet and wind up?
I've even fallen into this in the past. You get married to a specific type of diet.
Well, I have too. I think every wellness.
There was a lady I was actually did a consult with that her name on her social media was tied to the carnivore diet. Yeah. Right? And that was part of her identity, right? She couldn't sleep and she refused to add carbohydrates into her diet. And I was just like, well, there's nothing we can really do to help you if you're not going to do that, right? So people get, I basically, this is like, it's the same thing with light, right? People are inside 97% of the time. So if I can get them to go outside 3 times a day, that's where I start. People's diets are so horrible. Like, absolutely. Like, you go to the gas station and I'm watching kids eating, they're picking up 4 or 5 Reese cup things, and they got a bag of Skittles, and then they got, that's their lunch. It's like, or the high school girls I work with, like, they're having one piece of pizza and 4 Twizzlers, so it's like, if I could get them to eat maybe some chicken nuggets, even if it's not that's all they have in the cafeteria instead of the pizza, at least they're getting a little more protein. If I can get people to eat like a fistful of protein at every meal, that's a win in the right direction. And then as they feel better, they want to do more and then want to do more, and so it's, we know, like, so my philosophy on diet has changed a lot over the years, but I basically eat seasonally. I eat more carbs in the summer, I eat less carbs in the winter. That's pretty much simple. I keep it to real food. I eat a variety of different vegetables. I eat proteins. I eat a moderate amount of seafood. I went a little overboard on the seafood thing for a while, but I get seafood at least several times a week. And I do well on potatoes and white rice. I don't do as much of that in the winter, but I eat a lot of sauerkraut, cabbage, spinach, lots of grass-fed meats, that sort of thing. So you also got to, what do people like? And I know you've got specific, the thing about the nice about you is you can target the diet. And
that's exactly right.
I know I need to do this too, is get a NutriVal to see where I'm at, to see if I'm actually getting what I need in my diet,
Right.
So, there's people that are going to have specific deficiencies that they need, either they got digestive issues and they can't absorb certain things, or they're not eating the right combination of foods. Right. So, they're
exactly
too much of something, or, they're missing something that is, basically causing a dysfunction in the assembly line.
Yeah.
So that's where the beauty of working with you is you can actually see what works. But, for the majority of people, if they just ate more real food, that would be a step in the right direction to get them going in the right way,
Yeah, we've seen this derail people so many different ways. I mean, too few carbs, too much fat, too little protein. I have to admit, it's rare for me to see somebody. I can't think of a single person I've seen getting too much protein, but I'm sure it's happened.
Probably me.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's funny thing with protein. The body just, tends to just soak it up and just use it however it wants to. But when people are trying to, train and exercise, or let alone reverse a chronic disease, but they're making one of these big mistakes because they thought that intermittent fasting was for them when it's not, or that they really needed to avoid lectins when they don't, or they really needed to make sure that they avoided, potassium because of something that they read online about their kidney function. I mean, sometimes these are just really big mistakes that people are making. And that leads me to the last thing I want to talk about today, which is the overtraining issues that we see with people that actually hold them back. And one of the reasons why I recommend that people work with you is just how they're derailing their health because they're actually working out too much with the mistaken thought that by working out more, they're going to get healthier.
Yeah. And there's a different way to look at this too. You can be, a lot of people will split hairs on this, but I think it's more underprepared. Their body's not resilient enough to do the training you're doing, right? They're already exhausted. They might not be doing a lot of physical activity, but their nervous system is on, they got a really low HRV score. They have a horrible work capacity and they're exhausted. They're not sleeping. And then they try to use intensity to fix that. They go to the class and they do it for an hour.
Yeah.
So that in a sense, you could say it's overtraining, but really it's under recovered and not being prepared. What I see a lot, especially in kids, is they don't get enough low level activity. And then they go to the intensity and then they're gassed or they don't move well because they don't have the foundation of the pyramid. Like the bigger the base of the pyramid, the taller the pyramid can go. And because of our modern life, we don't do as much during the day as we used to. We sit, we aren't doing manual labor. We're not mowing grass. We're not, we're just basically doing nothing. We're getting the food delivered to our door. Whereas 100 years ago, half of us were growing our own food and we were building fences and we were doing stuff, right? So if we did have to do something of high intensity, we had the resiliency to handle it, right? If you're not sleeping and you're exhausted, like you're not going to fix it with high intensity exercise, like low level aerobic activity to a point. Obviously you don't need to run a marathon, but low level activity is going to help actually shut off your alert state. It's going to give you more parasympathetic It's going to basically help regulate blood sugar, all these things that get you going in the right direction. And then you can stack, once you have that work capacity, then you can stack whatever intensity where you're trying to drive whatever adaptation you're trying to drive. And, talking about Joel again, our body only has so many resources, right? And so if you're spending all your resources on stress, you don't want to add more stress, because that's going to take away from your ability to recover. It's going to take away from your digestion. It's going to take away from all these other systems, right? We're not like the government. We just can't print money, wish we could, but we get thrown in jail for that.
Well, in a way, you can print money with things like stimulants and pre-workout and supplements.
There was a guy
doing that, but they will hit the wall and fail.
Sure. There was a guy named Lee Haney, and they always used to ask him about stimulants and, pre-workouts and stuff. He says, you're just borrowing energy from the future.
That's exactly what it is.
And here's the thing that most people don't realize about caffeine, and me too. I have to remind myself of this constantly. All caffeine does is block the receptors in your brain that tell you you're tired.
Mm-hmm.
So what does your brain do? It's really smart. It makes more of those receptors. So then you have to drink more caffeine just to break even. Before you know it, you're having 6 cups of coffee and you feel still exhausted. And guess what? When you come off that caffeine, it is absolutely god awful, because you've got massive amounts of tired receptors and nothing to block them.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and it takes your body weeks to like down regulate all those things, right? So I always tell people that, including myself, I have to remind myself, like, okay, that caffeine's going to feel good temporarily, but I take breaks. Like, I'll take a few week break, and then I'll try and sprinkle a little caffeine in, and then I'll get in trouble, and then I'll take a break. And then, I'm human. Caffeine stimulants are one of my struggles. Like, I love the feeling of, being alert.
And many of the people
learning how to slow down. Learning how to slow down was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, learning how to sit quietly was way harder than any athletic endeavor I'd ever done.
Yeah, I hear you. So those are the fundamentals. That's what we're going to be unpacking in the rest of this course. So questions, comments, you can email Jim or I. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day.